We have been reading so many books lately, and you are all getting so good at listening that we need to come up with something new for all of you to do. So today when we start our new book, we're going to start looking at what connections and questions are. So a connection is when you hear something that reminds you of something that you've done or that you've heard someone talk about, and you're going to raise your hand and tell me what your connection is that goes with the story. And a question is when you're reading, or when we're all reading the story, and there's something that you just don't know about or you want to hear more about, so then you're going to raise your hand and wiggle your fingers so I know it's a question, and then we will all look at your question together. So as we're reading, I'm going to give you a lot of different examples of what they sound like. So as you get comfortable, you can start making connections and questions. So this is a book that we're going to be reading for the next 3 days, and we're going to get really good at it. So it's something that we're going to have a lot of practice doing. So why do good readers make questions and connections? Well, it's so we understand the book better, so we get better at learning how to really get what's going on in it, so then we can really understand it. So, the book that we're going to start reading is called Miss Spider's Tea Party by David Kirk. Has anybody read this book before? Okay, so we're all new. Alrighty. One lonely spider sipped her tea while gazing at the sky. She watched the insects on the leaves and many flying by. If I had friends like these, she sighed, who'd stay a while with me, I'd sit them down on silken chairs and serve them cakes and tea. So I have a connection here. So I love eating cake and I love drinking tea. So if I had my friends over, then we would eat cake and drink tea. So I'm going to write that down on one of our orange Post-its over here. So I like cake and tea. So we have this one. We're going to stick it in here on this page. So that is our first connection. Two timid beetles, Ike and May, crept from the woodwork that same day. But when Miss Spider begged, please stay, they shrieked, oh no, and dashed away. 3 fireflies flew inside that night, their spirits high, their tails alight. They spied the web and squeaked in fear, we'd better get away from here. The little trio did not feel they'd care to be a spider's meal. What's your connection?
I squeak when I see a spider web.
Awesome, that's a great connection. Is anybody else scared of spiders too? I'm really scared of spiders. So squeaking at spiders. That was a great first connection. Alrighty, so we're gonna stick that on this page. 4 bumblebees buzzed by outside. Please come to tea, Miss Spider cried. The 4 ignored her swaying there. She waved a tea towel in the air. She took a cup and tapped the glass. Then one bee spoke to hear at last. We would be fools to take our tea with anyone so spidery. So I have a question. What do we think a tea towel is? Does anyone know? No? Okay, so let's write that down as our first question. Tea towel. What is a tea towel? So we'll look at our questions tomorrow and we'll try and figure out those a little bit better. Within the shadows of the room, just peeking from behind a broom, 5 grinning faces bobbed and peered. Miss Spider smiled. Her heart was cheered. Descending for a closer look, she danced into the gloomy nook, but sadly found those jolly mugs belonged, alas, to rubber bugs. Some ants strode in, they numbered 6, but ants with spiders will not mix. She brewed them tea from hips of roses, the proud plantoon turned up their noses. A fine bouquet concealed its prize of 7 dainty butterflies. Miss Spider, watching from the wall, was not aware of them at all. The tea table was set for 8, with saucers, cups, and silver plate. The cakes were fresh, the service gleamed, yet no one would arrive, it seemed. Her company in no demand, left her a cup for every hand. 9 spotted moths kept safe and warm, in shelter from a thunderstorm. They stood beneath an open sash and watched the jagged lightning flash. Miss Spider dropped down on a thread, a silver tray above her head. She'd hoped to please them, but instead... What's your question?
Is a moth like a butterfly?
That's a really good question. That's something that we'll look at tomorrow when we read this again. A moth, a butterfly. Does anyone know what a moth is? Okay, I don't know either. That was a great question. They flew away in mortal dread. They've left me all alone, she cried. She dabbed her eyes and sadly sighed. It's plain no bug will ever stay. Her tears splashed down upon her tray.
I cry when I get sad.
I think everyone cries when they get sad. Cries when sad. That's another really good connection. I think we're starting to get the hang of this. 10 tiny steaming cups of tea were perched atop her trembling knee. She sipped and sobbed, then heard a cough, and turned to see a small wet moth. A fragile thing so soaked by rain, his wings too damp to fly again. She smiled and took a checkered cloth to cloak the frail and thankful moth. They talked and snacked on tea and pie until his tiny wings were dry. Then lifting him with tender care, she tossed him gently in the air. The moth told Ike, then Ike told May, who went from bug to say, there is no reason for alarm. She's never meant us any harm. So later on that afternoon, assembled in the dining room, 11 insects came to tea to share Miss Spider's courtesy. 12 tender violets in a vase. Now I have a connection, because if I were to have a tea party, I would put out violets too, because those are so pretty. So I'm going to write that on one of our connection cards. Put it on this side so we can see the picture. Set by her chair so neatly spun, she munched the blossoms one by one. Her friends were glad to watch her feast upon the floral centerpiece. It was a great relief to see. She ate just flowers and drank just tea. Miss Spider's reputation grew, but before too long our hostess knew each bug who crawled or hopped or flew, and all their lovely children too. The end.